Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship. In today's episode, we are diving into the fascinating world of social entrepreneurship, where mission-driven individuals create innovative businesses that tackle social and environmental challenges while generating sustainable profits.
Our podcast addresses tools and concepts that are useful for the launch and growth of entrepreneurial ventures. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Professor Palin. How are we?
Doing really well. How are you doing?
Busy, but that's always fun.
Well, the alternative is worse, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Boredom is the killer. We've gotten here today to talk about something that you and I have spent a whole lot of time over the past probably 10 years of our relationship, putting energy into, a lot of focus around, and time and money as well. And that's social entrepreneurship.
That's a passion both of us have. As a matter of fact, I've given workshops around the globe on social entrepreneurship, and I know you've participated in some of those with me.
Yeah, we have. It's a concept that the two words of social and entrepreneurship, I'm sure people have some thoughts on what this is, but we really wanted to highlight the growing field of social entrepreneurship because it's a fun one and we love it. From a basic concept, social entrepreneurship is a concept that combines the principles of entrepreneurship, so what we're here talking about every day on the podcast, with creating a positive social or environmental impact. So something that has a core facet of that business to create a positive impact in the world. Does that about sum it up in your eyes?
Yeah, it does. Ever since I've been involved with social entrepreneurship, there's always someone saying, give me a definition of social entrepreneurship. You can fall into that dark pit of them arguing with you forever.
Right.
But I like to keep it simple. And really, you're trying to make some type of social or environmental impact. It's not a traditional venture. Also, you can, and I encourage, this is the ones I'm interested in, a for-profit business that not just exclusively has a for-profit mentality, but also has a social impact mentality and balances those.
Right. A lot of time you hear the concept of a triple bottom line. So a for-profit business that's also has some sort of impact as one of the bottom lines of the business, the core ideals of that business.
And that can address areas all over the world. It's amazing how many social issues can get addressed, from potable water to energy to education to homelessness. The list goes on and on and on. And entrepreneurs addressing that can have a major impact. I'm not opposed to the traditional nonprofits, but the problem that when I speak to people in those organizations, they're spending an inordinate amount of their time trying to raise funds, writing grants, looking for philanthropic donations, and it's always a chase for support. And the problem is there's thousands of very good organizations with a smaller pot of funds to attract. And it's a continuous struggle where if you do a for-profit business, the business is driving the funds to sustain the social issue. So you're not in a long line of people trying to get those donations from people.
That's exactly right. And how many times over the past, even 2 years, but talk about 10 years, have you seen that funding dry up? Times get a little tougher for people. They don't make the same donations they'd normally make. The government pulls back on grant programs and the amount of money going through those programs. And then everybody relying on that business isn't getting what they're relying on. Whereas a for-profit business is a lot more sustainable from a perspective of money coming in than money going towards that cause.
Yeah, in down economic terms, at least in the United States, it's very difficult to raise funds because many people are making donations for tax reasons. And if they don't have a profit, they don't have a tax incentive to make the contribution. And they very often will say, I'll defer to next year. And if you have 80% of your donors saying, I'm deferring to next year, you have a problem. They're still interested in the cause, but they're also looking for a tax write-off.
A lot of research does actually say that people are doing it not only to help a cause, they're picking the cause because they want to help that cause, but the amount of money is often dictated by tax or other financial reasons.
Yes, it's deferring in down economic terms. I've talked to many people doing nonprofits, and that is a big problem for them.
It really is. It really is. We've kind of outlined what this is now. Do you have a really good example that people can latch onto of someone that's just absolutely killing it in the social entrepreneurship field?
My favorite is, and I know I've shared this with you and many of my students, is elephant branded. James Boone out of the University of Bath, it was on a study abroad trip. He saw, I believe it was Ghana. He saw that the school children didn't have simple school supplies. And when I say that, a school of 1,000 children, and they might have 15 pencils. He went to a local cement company called Elephant Branded and asked for any of the spare canvas sacks. Brought that to outer regions of rural areas and asked individuals if they could make something. And they made these cool backpacks and carry-on cases. He developed this online. You can buy some really cool items. Go take a look, elephantbranded.com. The contributions or the profits, a large percentage of it goes to supporting educational issues and buying supplies for the children. But also there's an environmental twist because he was getting the used cement bags out of the landfill. So there's an environmental component. And also the individuals in the rural towns, he increased their income. So there was a socioeconomic factor to his business. So he's got a threefer. That's why I love it so much.
That, and I will add, he's making good money doing it.
Yes. And last time I saw James, though, he was very thin. I was hoping that he would take more of it himself. I was worried that he wasn't eating enough, but he is very passionate about the social issue. In my conversation with him, not as overly concerned with the profit generation.
Which is fantastic. It really is fantastic.
I admire him tremendously just from that attitude or perspective.
Hopefully that rounds out a good example of it. Another really great example is the Grameen Bank. It's founded by Muhammad Yunus, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard of Muhammad Yunus. He's the founder of microlending. So the principle of small amounts of money being given to people in great need that is then invested over and over and over again. So $1 can have a really great impact. It's a bank. That's the basis of the business. But this bank does these micro programs where they're giving loans out to people in need all across the world and then reinvesting that. So as soon as the loan is paid back, they give it to another individual. Another really awesome example with a super high impact.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Muhammad Yunus. I introduced him at an event when I was the director of an entrepreneurship center at my previous university. A very incredible individual. And he was a Nobel Prize winner as a result of his activities in this area.
Absolutely. And for good reason. I can't imagine the lives that he's touched through that program.
Another one that I have found very impactful is the concept called Tutu Desk. This was a gentleman, Shane Elmelman. He saw that in sub-Saharan Africa, the children didn't have simple desks to write on to learn how to write. If they had a chair, they were getting on their knees and writing on their chair. Some of them didn't even have chairs, and they were trying to write on the dirt floor of the schoolroom. He created a lap desk. Bishop Desmond Tutu lended his name to that activity. He was distributing lap desks so the students had a solid platform to learn how to simple as writing.
Which is something we can all look at and think how great of an impact is education on young minds and how much of an impact is getting them into a better educational environment going to have on the world down the road.
If anyone wants to get involved with this, there's plenty of information out there, but there's some really good organizations they can turn to. Ashoka is one. The Schwab Foundation for Social Enterprise is another. There's the Skoll Foundation, and there are a dozen others. I would suggest people start with those three and research the concept of social enterprise, which that's what a entrepreneurial venture, that's a social entrepreneurship activity is called a social enterprise, and do some homework and research on that. I think they'd be very surprised and pleased with the results and the impact they can have on the world.
The world and your local community. You know, I want to emphasize that people listening to this might have a business that is for profit, which we obviously highly encourage, but there is an impact that you could make as a branch of what you're doing right now. Creatively think about how you can bring up the community around you and the communities around them, and then around them, and then around them.
I've seen all different activities. It can be local, regional, it can be federal, it can be global. There's all different types of applications to this, but it can be as small as your neighborhood and have a major impact.
That's exactly right. Hopefully this is impactful. That's the goal of social entrepreneurship. Do you have anything else that you want to end with?
There's a couple of the areas that someone's getting involved with this they should research. There's an organization, if you're structuring a venture that's a social enterprise, in lieu of having a standard corporation, you can create a B corporation. And that's very important if you're looking for external funding. individuals that invest in social enterprises, they're called impact investors, another area someone could research. The problem that was being faced with the standard corporation, if you take investors, you have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit. In just the nature of a social enterprise, that's the opposite of what they were trying to do. The B Corporation was developed where it's also part of your mission is a social impact in addition to the profit motive. So it's a nice blend. It's a hybrid of that. That's another area I would suggest people look at.
You have to talk to your attorney. I know that B corporations are accepted in some states and not others, and there's some complexity around that.
Definitely speak to your attorney about that. Ask about B corporations. It's well worth researching if you want to move into that venue.
Fantastic.
I would thank everyone for joining us, exploring the concept of social entrepreneurship. I would like to hear any examples of some really cool social enterprises that people have experienced and run across or are driving themselves. I'm just fascinated by the field. And so until next time, keep learning, growing, pushing the boundaries, and in this case, have a social impact.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's do it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. As always, you can head over to ProfSpirit.com to check out more resources and courses designed for you, the entrepreneur. Please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and others to get the most up-to-date information as it is released.